One time I met the governor of Rhode Island, and he gives an awesome handshake. It's firm, but it's not too firm. It's soft, but it's not too soft, and it's met with deep eye contact and a smile that says very genuinely, I know I'm not going to have any idea who you are in 5 minutes, but right now I'm really happy to meet you. I was at training camp for a fellowship program that I did right after I graduated college called Venture for America, which is kind of like Teach for America. It takes recent graduates and sends them for 2 years off to cities around the country, but instead of sending us to schools in underperforming districts, it sends us to startups. So I was on my way to Las Vegas, and this was a training camp that they had put together to help get us out of the academic mindset where there's always a right answer and put us into the entrepreneurial mindset where there's no right answer ever. It was weird because this was 3 weeks after school. You know, or after graduation, you have that last month of school where you're struggling to pull as much meaning and just being genuine out of each moment with your friends left that you possibly can. You need to finish your final assignments, and then your family comes in, and then there's the graduation celebrations. You sleep off your hangover, and then you go home. And for me, then I went almost immediately to this training camp where I was told I was supposed to have just as genuine of relationships with everybody around me, but I had not met any of them before, so it was a little odd. But some of the fellows were staying in Providence, Rhode Island, where we were, and so the governor had the grand idea to host a welcome reception to welcome them and all of us who were training at a school in his state. It was very nice of him. So here I am, lost in this moisturized, well-manicured heaven. And eventually I know it's time to end this firm grasp. I can't go on forever. And I feel my phone vibrate in my pocket, and it's a call. It's definitely not a text message. It keeps vibrating. So I finally let go, and I wander off into the corner. And I see that it's my sister. And my heart drops probably about 3 feet onto the floor. Earlier that morning, I'd woken up to a long text message from my sister, Courtney, saying, hey, I just want to let you know Dad went to the hospital last night. They don't know what's wrong. He fell, was having some difficulty getting up. Give me a call when you wake up, and I'll give you an update. So it was the most excruciating 2 hours while I waited for the time difference to catch up with me, and I could call her at a reasonable hour, and I called. And she said, so his test results came in late last night. They don't really know what's going on. They had to transfuse his entire blood supply, which is kind of a significant thing, and he'll probably be here for a week. And then by lunchtime that day, she had called me back to say, hey, the test results keep coming back inconclusive, but he's really not doing so well. It's probably going to be more like a month. And it was the long weekend coming up. It was 4th of July weekend was on its way, and so I offered to come home for the long weekend just to be there to help out, to see if there was anything I could do. And so I bought some tickets, was planning to go home, got re-immersed back into the fellowship training camp, went to this very nice cocktail hour with the governor, lost myself to his wonderful handshake. And now I'm looking at the phone, and it's her, and I pick up, and all she says is she's audibly upset. She just says, can you get on a plane tonight? And it wasn't that time stopped in that moment and the world stood still. It was just more like everything became untethered. It was floating through nothingness. I was staring at my phone trying to figure out how do you make this little magic box of electronic gizmos turn itself into a plane ticket right here, right now. And it just wasn't registering. Eventually I composed myself and I called the travel agency. There weren't any planes out that night. Providence is, like Colorado Springs, a very small airport, so they didn't have any options. But they were able to get me on a plane first thing in the morning. And I'm not really sure how I spent that night. I'm sure that I talked with my family, probably called some friends. But before I knew it, I was in a cab on my way to the airport, forcing myself to make small talk with the cabbie about the wildfires in Colorado. And I mean, honestly, in any other situation, I probably would have been touched by his concern. He had gone on vacation many times in this part of the world and felt very genuinely bad about the tens of thousands of acres that were going up in smoke. But in that moment, I just could not care less about anything he had to say. I just wanted to get to the airport. And we get to the airport, the flight's on time, we get through security, get on the plane. And we're taking off, and it's an overcast day. We break through the clouds, and there's just this magnificent blue sky out the window. The sun is just starting to peek above the clouds. And they have that awesome kind of bubble wrappy texture, but the way that the sun is hitting them, it's just so soft. And I have this memory about when I was about to go to school, when I was leaving home on my way to college. I stopped at my dad's house the night before I got on the airplane. And he was watching TV, probably a baseball game. That was his favorite thing to do. And we sat and we talked for a little while. And then it was time for me to go, and he got up to give me a hug. And when we pulled apart, there were tears coming down his face, and I'd never seen my dad cry before. And he just said, "Well, take care of yourself, son. I'm really going to miss you." And I'm sitting on this airplane thinking, am I going to cry when I see my dad this time? And right then, it just all washed over me. I came back down to earth, and I realized that I was on an airplane. I realized why I was on an airplane. I realized what I was probably going to go do once that airplane landed, and I just started bawling. It probably wasn't helped by the fact that Mumford & Sons song about keeping your feet on the ground as like a way to steady yourself came on my iPod. Here I am in the air. Yeah, that wasn't helpful. And tears are just running down my face. And of course, that's when the flight attendant comes by to give me my morning beverage. And I quickly, I wipe my eyes. Heaven forbid she see me cry. I'm in public. Well, actually, it was more of, I'm crying because of my relationship with my dad. And that's between me and him. And I don't know this woman. And I don't think I'm ready to show her this relationship. I don't think there's space for her in it. So I order my orange juice. Nothing else happens that flight. We land in Atlanta because the most direct way from Providence northeast to Denver west is through Atlanta south. And get on the next airplane. We land in Denver. First thing I do is call my sister. Hey, what's going on? How are things? Things are okay right now. He's stable. Aunt Suzanne and Uncle Dick, my dad's sister and brother-in-law, they're on a plane 45 minutes behind you if you want to wait in the terminal for them. Mom's there. She's ready to drive you down, but maybe you guys can all ride down together. And I agree. I think that sounds like a good idea. Find myself a spot in the terminal. But as soon as my butt hits that seat, I get a call from her again, and I pick up right away, and again, very audibly upset, crying again, and she just says, "Drive." So I go find my mom, sprint out of the airport. And now, my mom is not somebody to leave the airport without a hello hug, nor is she somebody to leave the airport without double-checking your seatbelts. And she's definitely not anybody to spin the tires on her way leaving the passenger pickup area. All three of those rules were forgotten. She slammed on that accelerator. I didn't know Subaru Foresters could go that fast. And we accelerated down the highway. I call my sister back again, and I say, "Okay, what's going on?" And she just goes, "He's taken a turn for the worse. Do you want to talk to him?" Well, of course I want to talk to him. I mean, this is my dad. Come on. So she puts the phone to his ear, and all I hear is him breathing. And if I didn't know any better, it just sounds like he's sleeping. It was a sound that I had heard many, many, many times before when I was little, waiting for the clock to turn 8 o'clock because the rule was you can't turn the TV on until it's 8 o'clock because otherwise you wake Dad up. And I say, "Dad, it's me. I'm coming." And my mom is on the other side of the car. "Speak up, speak up, speak up. He's deaf. He can't hear you. You got to speak louder so he can hear you." That's all I got. So my sister takes the phone back and just says, "I'll see you when you get here." It turns out that my dad's heart rate had stabilized enough during that phone call that he was still there when we arrived back in Colorado Springs about an hour and a half later. My sister met me in the waiting room to the ICU where my dad was being treated. She gave me a big hug, and she just says, "I want to warn you, it's not pretty." "What do you mean?" "Well, when they put the breathing tube in last night, they knocked out his front teeth." And I say, "His front teeth?" And then I just start laughing because these fucking teeth, man. So I don't know what the first injury was, but probably 10 years before he knocked out his 4 front teeth, or the roots went bad or something. But instead of getting dentures, he had his dentist, who was a friend of him, fuse them back together and then fuse them to the next teeth there. And I can understand that maybe it was a financial decision the first time or the second time or the 5th time or the 6th time. But by the time you're in the 20th and the 21st time he's reattaching these teeth, that's definitely has nothing to do with your finances. And I would always come home from school or from work or whatever, and my dad would be there holding his teeth in, biting out of a sandwich because the dentist couldn't get him in for a few days. So it seems so fitting that in this situation, the teeth would finally decide that, you know what, I think we've had enough. We walk into the room, and it's not pretty. But beside all of the machines and the needles and the tubes and the beeps and everything, I'm overwhelmed by how small my dad looks, surrounded by these machines, covered by these sterile white hospital sheets. He hung on long enough for my aunt and uncle to get there, and we had a brief moment as a family. And then it was time to take the tube out. Now, for those of you who haven't been with someone when they die, there's really 2 stories of death in my experience. One is what happens to the person, the being that lives inside of the body. And that's a very peaceful story. It's a release, an unwinding, a letting go, a magical transition to whatever comes next. And then there's what happens to the body. And that's not a peaceful story. Your body tries as hard as it can to keep you alive. It doesn't want to die, and it does everything in its power to keep going. So we're sitting there, watch my dad's entire body just be raked by these just massive breaths, his mouth gaping and nostrils flaring and convulsions, and eventually he lies still. We left the hospital a little while later on our way to the car, and it was just this gorgeous Colorado July day. The storm clouds were rolling off to the east. There was this wonderful light breeze that was just enough to rattle the leaves on the trees, but nothing more. It's warm. And I see that my mom has parked the car in a cul-de-sac, not in the hospital parking lot, but in a cul-de-sac next to it. And I'm struck by the fact that this is the same cul-de-sac that my dad and I would turn our bikes around in when I was little. We would ride up from the Old West Side and up Tejon and turn around and go back. And I just have this memory. I have this vision of me on my little red bike following my dad's big red bike. But where my dad should have been, riding his bike, was just nothing. And then we went to dinner.